Ukrainian authorities claim that their forces are transitioning from defensive to offensive operations in a number of sectors. With the help of tanks, artillery, and drones, the Ukrainian army is clearly trying to advance south, and attacks have been carried out by the Ukrainian military against Russian troops occupying vital southern areas. As evidence that Ukraine has resumed its offensive, they pointed to the activity of armored personnel carriers and unmanned aerial vehicles directing artillery fire. Ukraine has conducted counter-offensive operations with varying degrees of success. Several Russian tanks rolled into battle before one of them was hit in southern Ukraine. The tank moved several meters further before bursting into flames, the attack taking place at Novodorivka, in southern Ukraine. The area is one of 5 where Ukraine has launched a counterattack. This is the moment a Russian tank was flown into the sky by a Ukrainian Stunger P missile near Vuhgolda. The Ukrainian armed forces showed the tank burning and smoking. Russian troops fled Bakhmut after a fierce Ukrainian counterattack captured a town on the northern side of the besieged city. The incredible footage also shows waves of Ukrainian soldiers climbing out of trenches and advancing on Russian positions in World War I-style attacks. The Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade launched a surprise attack using tanks and armored infantry to destroy the front line of the Russian army. Drone footage shows Ukrainian tanks destroying Russian positions in Bakhmut as Putin's troops flee. Ukrainian anti-armor tactics, weapons, and will to fight halted, stopped, damaged, or completely destroyed hundreds of invading tanks during the opening months of the war. All available information suggests that the destruction of Russian tanks has continued at a rapid and even alarming pace. There are many statistical assessments that, given the well-understood information warfare variables in combat, differ greatly. All of the estimates, however, tell a similar story, which is that Ukrainian anti-armor weapons, artillery, and tactics are destroying Russian T-72s, T-80s, and T-90s. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reports that Ukrainians have destroyed as many as 3,702 Russian tanks, though reports from multiple news organizations such as the Wall Street Journal, Telegraph, Business Insider, and The Guardian vary considerably, generally ranging from in count between 1,000 to 2,000 Russian tanks having been destroyed. One report in the Guardian newspaper cites the International Institute of Strategic Studies saying Russia's existing tank fleet in its army has reduced from 2,927 to 1,800, a massive 1,100 in tank losses. This count is also aligned with a Russian tank destruction assessment from Oryx open source intelligence, cited in Sandbox News, which notes the destruction or capture of more than 1,100 tanks. Finally, the Pentagon is also quoted as suggesting this number, having estimated that as many as 1,000 Russian tanks have been destroyed. There has been no shortage of analysis, speculation, and factual reporting regarding the mixture of reasons why this appears to be the case. The exact combination of a number of variables may be impossible to assess, yet some of the main reasons relate to the effectiveness of anti-armor weapons such as Javelin anti-tank missiles. Another widely discussed factor is the tactical ineptitude of Russian attackers, as observed by many. Not only did approaching Russian invasion forces to encounter logistical and supply problems, but many expert observers remarked that the Russian military did not appear very skilled in combined arms maneuver. Finally, perhaps the most impactful reason may simply be Russian morale, as many Russian soldiers may have simply not wanted to kill Ukrainians or impair themselves in support of a questionable cause. There were numerous anecdotal reports of Russian soldiers abandoning their vehicles in an apparent effort to abandon the fight. In a purely tactical or military sense, Russian tanks may not have been maintained and upgraded to the necessary extent with communications technology, advanced sensors, and weaponry to present the kind of threat Ukraine anticipated. Russian tanks appear, at least to a large extent, to lack active protection systems capable of tracking and intercepting incoming anti-tank munitions. Added to this vulnerability, Russian tanks are also reported to be disproportionately vulnerable to top-down attacks, as evidenced by many photos of destroyed Russian tanks. Clearly adept Ukrainian fighters have been using elevated terrain or buildings at key points from which to attack and destroy incoming Russian tanks. But on the other hand, the military operation carried out by the Ukrainian armored group near Orakovo ended in failure. New footage from the scene of the counterattack battle has been published. This video clearly shows the destruction of the column of the Ukrainian armed forces. The footage shows bright moments of the operation, which once again confirms the defeat of the Ukrainian troops. Particular attention in the video is drawn to the moment of destruction of the American infantry armored vehicle, Bradley. A powerful explosion engulfed a combat vehicle, which turned out to be part of a military convoy of the Ukrainian armed forces. The flames and thick smoke billowing into the air clearly showed the extent of the damage. Ukrainian troops lost dozens of armored vehicles in their failed attempts to suppress Russian firing positions and reach the front line with infantry. The attack of the Ukrainian armored forces, which was expected to be strong and decisive, was suddenly stopped under the strong counter-fire. Sources report the destruction of the entire armored group consisting of Leopard 2 tanks. In conditions of intense artillery fire, Ukrainian armored vehicles were forced to line up in columns and move along roads, up to trying to break through minefields, which made their movements predictable and vulnerable to Russian artillery. As is well known, at least 3 Ukrainian Leopard 2 tanks and 2 French AMX-10 RC-wheeled tanks were damaged, and the combat vehicles were blown up by mines, rendering them immobilized. Currently, they are in the so-called gray zone, and neither the Ukrainian nor Russian sides are able to evacuate them. However, given that the Ukrainian armed forces have failed to make headway in their counterattack, it is likely that the trophy will fall into the hands of the Russian military in the near future. The main problem with the Ukrainian side was that, for unknown reasons, the tanks were not equipped with mine-resistant trawls. This was probably done in order to increase the maneuverability of the armored vehicles, but in fact, this led to the fact that the armored group of the armed forces of Ukraine was vulnerable, and the counterattack attempt failed without starting. The Russian Defense Ministry announced the unsuccessful offensive operation of the Ukrainian armed forces on the South Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia fronts. According to the agency, during the fighting, Ukraine suffered significant losses, including 4 Leopard tanks, 5 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, and a lot of other military equipment. In the last 24 hours, the armed forces of Ukraine made several attempts to attack in this direction, but all were unsuccessful. On the Zaporizhzhia front, the active operations of Troop Group Vostok, supported by aviation and artillery, made it possible to repel 2 Ukrainian attacks, each with forces of up to 1 battalion reinforced with tanks. The direction of this attack was the settlements of Yablaniv and Novopokrovka in the Zaporizhzhia region. Attacks were also carried out on 2 columns of armored vehicles of the Ukrainian armed forces in the residential areas of Novodanilovka and Malaya Tokmachka, also located in the Zaporizhzhia region. On the Vremevsky Ledge, Ukrainian troops launched 3 attacks, each with up to a company of motorized infantry, on the area of the Levadny settlement in the Zaporizhzhia region, as well as the Storozivo and Neskoknoy DPRs. All attacks were repulsed thanks to the brave and decisive actions of units of the Vostok Troop Group. Over the past day, the total losses of the Ukrainian armed forces in this area amounted to 300 militants, 9 tanks, 4 of which were German Leopards, 11 infantry fighting vehicles, including 5 American Bradleys, 14 armored vehicles, 6, as well as self-propelled artillery mounts. French production César propelled